So several weeks into this pandemic, I began a meeting by asking a friend how she was doing. And she answered, I'm trying to decide if I'm supposed to get used to this mess or if I'm supposed to just keep hoping that it will end soon. And that's the question I've been asking myself ever since. We hear the words new normal a lot. We have to get used to this situation. We have to learn to do things like Shabbat or holidays or school or B'nai Mitzvah differently. We have to accept the realities of Zoom and live stream, working from home, watching too much Netflix. We might appreciate some of the silver linings, like if you're still in your pajamas right now, or if you want a snack, or if you need to mute me, or to check on a service in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles, you can do it. It's kind of like that story of the guy who went to his rabbi before Kol Nidre coinciding with the World Series. You mean you can record Kol Nidre? Actually, yes we can. But used to it? No. Learning how to cope is not the same thing as getting used to it. Learning new technologies, demonstrating resilience, finding a safe way to play golf or tennis or get takeout, that's not the same as getting used to it. This is not my new normal. There's nothing normal about it. And yet, resilience is part and parcel of Jewish history. Jews have repeatedly found ways to survive and thrive in less than ideal circumstances. It was the year 70. The Romans were surrounding the walls of Jerusalem. Hope was lost. It was understood that within a few days, the inhabitants of the city would run out of food. The mighty Roman army would sack the city. Tragedy would ensue. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai came up with a plan. He hid in a coffin, and he had his students carry him outside the city. They reached the Roman camp, and Rabbi Yochanan emerged from the coffin to greet the general Vespasian. Shlama aleich malka, shlama aleich, he said, peace be upon you, O king, peace be upon you. To which Vespasian responded, I'm not the king. Rabbi Yochanan continued, well, I know you're going to be king because our scripture tells us that the holy temple will fall into the hands of a king. Well, just then, says the Talmud, an imperial messenger arrived and announced to Vespasian, rise, for the emperor has died and the noblemen of Rome have appointed you as their leader. Vespasian, we can imagine, was overjoyed, and in appreciation, the new emperor told the rabbi to make a wish. Now, Rabbi Yochanan understood that it would be too much to try to save the city. It would be too much to try to save the temple. He just asked that the Roman armies be good enough to spare Yavne and its academy in the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel. In that moment, Rabbi Yochanan set the table for Judaism to flourish without its most sacred space. He set the conditions for Torah to replace sacrifices as the centerpiece of our spiritual lives. That's resilience. Jewish life adjusted to the new reality. The ideological descendants of Rabbi Yochanan interpreted Torah and produced the Talmud in exile. And after almost 2,000 years, here we are. Now fast forward another 900 years, sometime around 960. The Babylonian Jewish community was beginning to dwindle. The medieval historian Abraham ibn Daud tells a story of four great rabbis, Rabbi Chushiel, Rabbi Shmariah, Rabbi Moshe, and a fourth whose name was lost, who boarded a ship in Bari, Italy, to sail the Mediterranean. The ship was captured by the pirate Ibn Rumachis, who saw in these rabbis an opportunity to earn a ransom. So, Rabbi Shmariah was taken to Egypt, where he was ransomed by the Jews of Alexandria and then went on to establish academies and schools and other institutions in the city of Fostat, where he became their chief rabbi. It was off to Tunisia, where the Jews of Kairouan ransomed Rabbi Chushiel and made him their chief rabbi. and then Spain, where Rabbi Moshe was ransomed by the Jews of Cordoba. Ibn Daud describes how he went on to lead the community and to establish the schools where such luminaries as Moses ibn Ezra, Moses Maimonides, Judah Halevi were educated. The Spanish Jewish community entered a golden age, coming out of tragedy, not just in terms of Torah scholarship, but also culture. Jews became poets and wealthy financiers. The community thrived. The 12th century scholar Rabbeinu Tam even reworked Isaiah's promise. Isaiah says, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. Torah shall come forth from Jerusalem, the word from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. But no, said Rabbeinu Tam, in his world, Ki mi bari teitzei Torah, udevar Adonai me otranto. Torah shall come forth from Bari, the word of the Lord from Otranto. Our people, our God, our values don't just survive. We will thrive in any place, amidst any circumstances. It reminds me of the man who went to his rabbi down on his luck and in need of advice. The rabbi suggested the man look for inspiration in the Bible. It doesn't really matter where you begin, as there's so much wisdom in the good book. You can pretty much open to any page and just start reading. So a few months later, the man came back. He got out of his shiny Rolls Royce and handed the rabbi a check with more than a few zeros. The rabbi said, "Thank you, but just out of curiosity, I'm wondering about your swift change of fortune. What happened?" The man explained, "Well, I just took your advice. I went home, took my Bible off the shelf, opened it up, and it was right there in front of me." Well, what did you see? Chapter 11. Resilience. Certainly in this country, where immigrants arrive from lands of persecution with nothing, names like Macy and Rich and Rosenwald and Frankfurter and Morgenthau and Einstein and Wise and Schechter and Heschel. They established communities where there had been nothing. We experienced Renaissance. It wasn't easy. We know anti-Semitism, quotas in medical and law schools, restrictive neighborhood covenants, protocols of the elders of Zion. The Jews will not replace us. But they cannot win. Even the Nazis, much as they destroyed European Jewry, look at the state of Israel today. Look at our community today. Look even at resurging communities in Berlin or Moscow or Jerusalem or St. Petersburg. From Yavne to Babylonia, Bari to Cordoba, London to Lisbon to Breslau to New York to Jerusalem, Jewish life is malleable and resilient. But there is another thread to Jewish history as well, an opposing tendency that says no matter how successful I might be at any moment, regardless of how adjusted or attached we may be to a new world, regardless of how many new technologies are going to stick with us when this nightmare is over, we dare not forget what was. We dare not lose sight of what could be. We dare not abandon hope, hatikvah, our faith in the world as it should be. We can never be content with the world as it is. Another story. A grandmother was watching her grandchild play in the ocean, and a huge wave comes and crashes over the boy and washes him out to sea. The grandmother pleads. She looks up, "Please, God, save my grandson. I beg of you, bring him back." And just then, another wave comes, washes the child back onto the beach, good as new, not a scratch on him. And the grandmother looks up to heaven and says, "But he had a hat." Even when we're happy, even when we're grateful, we need to acknowledge the brokenness in our world. Some things are still missing. We know it from the Jewish wedding. We don't just say Mazel Tov, we break a glass. We remember the destruction of the temple and by extension, the suffering that exists beyond the walls of the wedding hall in our unredeemed world. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, if I ignore the suffering, May my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I don't elevate Jerusalem above my chiefest joy. Even in our happiest moment, we pause to think about the things that aren't right. The medieval sages decreed that when building a house, a part of the building should be left unpainted or without plaster. We're supposed to leave an empty space at every banquet table. It's one of the reasons traditional synagogues don't play music during worship. Not that we're in mourning all the time, just that we recognize that this, what we see, is not all there is. It may be great, but it's not quite normal. That's the Jewish conception of hope. Remember the past, the Holy Temple, the Garden of Eden, when things were great. Remember, hope, return. Not just in a pandemic. During the best days of the Golden Age, when Europe was at its height, even in America, freedom and liberty and opportunity are wonderful, but it isn't perfect. It comes at a price. The rabbis of the Talmud talk about a particularly beautiful, therapeutically relaxing bathhouse called Deomeset. It made people feel great, but the rabbis warned against going there. You see, you might get attached, they feared. You might love it so much that you forget all your responsibilities. You might feel so attached that you try their other traditions. That's how the lost tribes were lost. First it was the waters of Deomeset, they say. Then wine and frivolity, and soon they abandoned the Torah. Hundreds of years later, the Talmud says that Elazar ben Arach happened upon this bathhouse, and he became so attracted that he forgot his Torah. He forgot how to read. He opened his Bible to Exodus 12 and should have read, HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, this month shall be for you the first of the months. But his Daled became a Resh. His Zion became a Yud. His Kaf became a Bet. And he read, HaCheresh Haya Libam. Their hearts have become deaf. He was too attracted to the outside culture. We know it too. We made those mistakes. If you let it go, if you move on to other things, if you don't practice, you can lose it. Think about that. The next time you imagine you won't want to come back to the synagogue after the pandemic, now that you can just watch from home. Or when you quell about an accomplishment on the ball field. Gymnastics are great. Soccer is great. Harvard is great. But don't forget that there is more. The Jewish dream is more than just the American dream. It includes ongoing education, ritual skills, a strong connection to Israel, Shabbat, Kashrut, a mandate to be holy and bring holiness to the world. The Jewish dream means always believing in and working towards something better. Rabbi Schnitzer has hanging in his office a picture of Rabbi Stephen Wise. Born in Budapest in 1874, Wise emigrated to New York as a child and graduated from Columbia University. As a rabbi, he served communities in Portland and New York, and he became an advocate for progressive social causes. He promoted women's suffrage, helped found the NAACP, the ACLU, the American Jewish Congress. He fought against child labor and advocated for workers' rights. Not because it was the political thing to do, but because it was the hopeful thing to do. He felt a responsibility as a Jew to help establish a messianic kingdom of truth and justice and peace. On March 27, 1933, Wise pleaded before a packed crowd at Madison Square Garden. What is happening in Germany today, he thundered, may happen tomorrow in any land on earth unless it is challenged and rebuked. We must speak out. He wasn't just calling on Jews. The rabbi was calling on good people everywhere to read the news, look at their surroundings, and proclaim that this is not okay. We have to defeat Hitler. We have to defeat the stereotypes, the quotas, the sentiment that somehow Jewish lives matter less. Good people do not only look out for themselves, they cannot rest until all people enjoy the freedoms and opportunities they deserve. 30 years later, on August 28, 1963, another prominent American rabbi, Joachim Prince, gave the same message at the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, the most tragic problem, he said, is silence. America cannot become a nation of onlookers. America must not remain silent. We can't get used to this. Michael and Rita Schwimmer heard that message. Andrew Goodman heard that message. They went down to Mississippi and met James Chaney. They couldn't just accept America as it was. They joined the struggle to mend an unfinished nation. Tragically, they were murdered. But their names live on. Their dream lives on. We know it is their ideals, not the comforts of silent reticence, that represent the best of Judaism and the best of America. Maybe it was easier then. The white supremacists knew they were racist. George Wallace and Bull Connor knew they were defending racism. Same with Wilhelm Marr, who coined the phrase anti-Semitism because he opposed Jewish emancipation in Germany. But today is different. There are a few extremists who admit their racism, but they are not what makes it endure. So much seems baked into the system. So much is supported unwittingly by good people whose only sin is to accept the normality of the world as it is. The sin of racism lies in being unwilling to examine ourselves, to examine our environment, and to say, this is not normal. This moment calls for engagement and dialogue, particularly with the Black community. We share a history of cooperation and shared interests. And there are also troubling elements and dangerous ideas we have to confront. This moment calls for introspection. Not all Jews are white, and we can do more to make our community more welcoming and more diverse. This moment calls for education and examination and outreach. There really are good people on all sides, if by good people we mean people who love their children and pay their taxes and want to live in peace. Maybe we can do better than the polarizing labels of winner and loser, and sinner and saint. We did not cause the virus. We did not create the racism that's been part of America for too long. We cannot ignore the needs of our own community, which aren't going anywhere. But we have a role to play in this moment. Things are not as they should be, and we can be part of the solution if we but pledge to learn and to listen and to love. When I was a child, if I used to get a sore throat or a cold, I would sit through the pain and imagine to myself, if I can just get used to this raspy feeling, if I can just make this feel normal, then I'll be better and I can go back to school. And there's some truth to that attitude. Human beings, especially children, are incredibly resilient. It's amazing what we can get used to and what we can accomplish, even amidst the most trying of circumstances. But sometimes that's not enough. When fighting a strep throat, a little penicillin goes a long way. Vaccines matter too. It won't just go away. On a Rosh Hashanah like no other, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of social unrest, we need to pray. We need to unite. We need to adapt. We need to fight. And we need to imagine a world without a virus, where all people are free, where some speak out nonviolently and others listen, where the yearnings, the righteous yearnings of our hearts are fulfilled. May all our dreams become reality in the new year that lies ahead. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova.